Good day, everybody. This is now your combinations and suprasegmental features from Introduction to English Language Systems. From last time, we've learned already how to create your phonetic transcriptions using the symbols together with the proper vowel and consonant sounds. Furthermore, through the practice exercises we have made on IPA transcriptions, it's time to level things up by knowing further how to create different combinations and adjust them through the suprasegmental features into your respective phonetic environments. Now let's start. The first combination we need to go over is your diphthong. Now these diphthongs class are combined vowel sounds, and that note that in each case they begin with a vowel sound and end with the glides y or w. So basically, it goes around your I, your ow, a, ew, if there's one, o, oi, right? Those are the diphthongs. And class, in pronouncing the majority of single vowel sounds, our vocal organs assume one position very briefly. Take note of that, right? If you noticed again on the high, the mid, closed, central, front, right? It again assumes only one position if you try to observe your speech organs. But in pronouncing diphthongs class, it's a phenomenon where you move from one vocalic position to another as you produce the sound. A. Again, A. If you notice, there was a slight yet very brief movement in your speech organs. A. Now, the process class of diphthongization can actually happen with a wide range of vowel sounds and is more common in some varieties of English. One example of this would be the Southern British than in others. Now, most American English speakers pronounce the word say with a diphthong rather than a single vowel. For others, they would say say. But for some, it can still be possible as say, as in emphasizing the diphthong. You will also hear common pronouns such as we and they diphthongized. Still, it depends on us on how we try to hear it, but as for us at the same time who are Philippine English speakers, we try to adjust our tongues and even our speech organs to that of American English. Now, the sound patterns of language. First, phonology is the study of sound patterns in human language. Further, phonology is essentially the description of the systems and patterns of speech sounds in a language. It is, in effect, based on theory of what every speaker of a language unconsciously knows about the sound patterns of that language. Again, we have also discussed way back before that when we're talking about phonology, it goes around how we manipulate the sounds that we have basically from vowel and consonant sounds. By going back and forth, you will notice that there are differences on how you pronounce each word, even if you have the same sound. Now, let's now talk about sounds. Now, as you try to read further the quotation below while I'm trying to discuss, you might notice that it's not really English at all. But let's try to pay attention first. Is this really not English, or is this English? If I will try to read the first sentence there, by and by comes Goldilocks. Isn't that familiar? The sound created even by just reading it again goes on English, right? By and by comes Goldilocks. For the information of everybody class, this actually is coming from the introductory lines from the story Goldilocks and the Three Bears. Now, if you're so familiar about it and you think you can read this one, I'd like you now to post your answers in the comment section of this video, basically on YouTube, so that again we can create further discussion about it and that we'll see who got the right answer. Okay? Or further, if you might want to confirm it, you can just put it also on MS Teams message, just on the comment section of the message post there. Let's go there. Next, phonology class is about the underlying design, the blueprint of each sound type, which serves as the constant basis of all the variations in different physical articulations of that sound in different contexts. Now, let's listen to this. When we think of the T sound in the words, or the T sound, tar, star, rider, and eighth as being the same, we actually mean that in the phonology of English, they would be represented in the same way. But in actual speech class, these T sounds are very different. Let me repeat that again. Tar, star, rider, eighth. See? There's a distinction as to how you are to pronounce that T, T, tar, star, rider, eighth. Although for some you may say that as rider, but still it can even be used as rider, right? How about eighth? You're not literally going to emphasize that as eighth. But for some of us, we are to pronounce that as eighth, right? Now, phonology then is concerned with the abstract set of sounds in a language that allows us to distinguish meaning in the actual physical sounds we say and hear. Again, we go about the manipulation of sounds that we've just learned. Now, furthermore, class, phonology is the study of sound patterns in human language. And when we talk about sound patterns, it's basically when we go up or down when we're speaking, right? Haven't you noticed that sometimes it is very much natural for us to speak in a high tone or even a low tone? Phonology is essentially the description of the systems and patterns of speech sounds in a language. It is, in effect, based on a theory of what every speaker of a language unconsciously knows about the sound patterns of that language. Now, class, for us to dissect further phonology, we have phoneme as the minimum phonetic unit that is not further analyzable into smaller units. Phone is the physical representation of phonemes, and your allophone is the phonetic variant of a phoneme. Let's say, for example, class. Again, you're pretty much aware that sometimes pronouncing P would not really make you to aspirate it, or aspiration means to produce a puff of air when you're pronouncing it. Just like when I say pronounce, 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 pat. When you hear those two words and try again to put your hand onto your mouth, in front of your mouth, you would hear a difference on the force created by your mouth in terms of the puff of air. Pronounce, pat, very much different. Now, at the same time, class, we also have the phonotactic constraints, or the study of the environment of sounds, which later on we'll get to see how phonotactic constraints, or the phonetic environments, go by with each other. Maximum of 3 consonant phonemes, subsequently following each other, such as tasks. Okay? Consonant clusters always start with S, such as stress, and maximum of 3 vowel phonemes subsequently following each other, such as continuous. Now, these are again what we call as the phonetic environments, because in English class, you might have also noticed that why is it that we have so many rhymes? And the reason for this one is because, again, in our phonology, by just replacing one letter from a specific word, we say pat. But if we replace P there, it becomes fat. But still, even with just the replacement of the letter there, you still can create words, right? That again goes around the phonotactic constraints. Now, your phoneme again class, going back, is the minimum phonetic unit that is not further analyzable into smaller units. This refers to the meaning distinguishing sounds in a language. Now, the concept of distinctiveness is captured by the notion of a phoneme. A phoneme is a distinctive or contrastive sound in a language. Now, going back from earlier, again, we pronounce words in a different way as compared to its spelling, right? And that has been well proven by the examples that we had before in IPA transcription, which is why, again, this is another reminder for everybody that not to base our pronunciation based just on the spelling that we see. What distinctive means in this context class is that the sound makes a difference in meaning and has communicative value. Now, let's take a look at this. Different phonemes make contrasts in words. Example, the N, L, and T are all phonemes because they serve to make contrasts in words, as in nab, lab, and tab. Now class, from earlier, I also have given the pat and the fat. And also, you can all even have bat, rat, right? So, that's a great example there that you can get on a phonetic environment there. Now, later on, we'll get to see how this phonetic environment really goes on. Now, on the nab, lab, and tab, here we see how the phonemes of a language are determined by means of what we are called as minimal pairs. Now, the one sound which contrasts is then determined to be a phoneme since it makes a difference in meaning. Example class here. So the phonetic environment that I am referring to now is a sequence of sounds such as at. And the at there, if we just establish a blank slot, basically just before the at there, you can now get to have a phonetic environment blank at and substitute different consonants in the slot, which is why you can get different words at the same time. So this is also another way, class, to get rhymes that easily, okay? So that is, again, another shortcut that I can recommend for everybody in case you're having difficulties. Now, substituting different consonants at this slot, you can see already that it can have different words. And it goes about consonants, take note. From the phonetic environment at, we read this again. For the phonetic environment at, we can have pat, pat, sat, mat, nat, fat, that, fat, cat. Right? Now, we can conclude that p, b, s, m, n, f, d, and v, and k are all phonemes. From here, if you just look into the sound which is created from the first one. And bat and cat, for example, are a minimal pair. The same can be done for vowels with a phonetic environment such as P blank T. Now, if you take note of this, again, don't look at the spelling, but rather look into the sound. Pit, peat, pate, pot, pout, put, put, pat, pat. Now, these ones here now, class, and these are now, of course, the vowels and diphthongs are all distinct phonemes. Okay? So I hope you now understand how phoneme works. Again, you look into a phoneme by looking into its phonetic environment. For this, you have your different phonetic environments as well as different from here. Okay? Now, while the phoneme is the abstract unit or sound type, there are many different versions of that sound type regularly produced in actual speech or in the mouth, right? So we can describe those different versions as phones. For example, again, your phones are phonetic units and appear in square brackets. Now, when we have a group of several phones, all of which are versions of one phoneme, and we add the prefix allo or allo, one of a closely related set, and refer to them as allophones of that phoneme. Now, the crucial distinction between phonemes and allophones is that class. Substituting one phoneme for another will result in a word with a different meaning, as well as a different pronunciation, of course, but substituting allophones only results in, take note of this, different and perhaps unusual pronunciation of the same word. So basically, again, class, when you look into phoneme and you try to change letters or the sounds into it, it will have different meanings, okay? But if you have your allophones and just substitute it with them, you can have, again, the same meaning but different pronunciation. Now, let's take a look at this. Before we go now to minimal pairs, there was a question raised to me before on how about if we try to use the schwa sound, right? And the schwa sound is a subject for allophone of the different vowel sounds that we have, right? And if we look into this, in our pronunciation, other people would say to it as pronunciation, They would use the sound there. Pronunciation. And for others, they would even use it as pronunciation. The real question here is, what is good or what is better? Well, actually, class, to describe it, and are actually allophones in the word of pronunciation. So that explains now basically how your allophones go about. Now, for minimal pairs class, another combination, phonemic or phonemic distinctions in a language can be tested via pairs and set of words. When two words such as pat and bat are identical in form, except for a contrast in one phoneme, which is the p and b, occurring in the same position, the two words are described as a minimal pair. So you've also learned about this basically in your high school days. Probably even in your Filipino class, you even had your minimal pairs. Now, other examples of English minimal pairs are fan, van, bet, bat, sight, and side. Now, such pairs class have traditionally been used in the teaching and testing of English as a second or foreign language to help students develop the ability to understand the contrast in meaning based on the minimal sound contrast. Now, again, in Filipino, we are very much problematic in terms of the proper pronunciation of words. And I honestly admit that I was also part of that. And even until now, I'm still having problems. But by familiarization of the different vowel sounds and even consonant sounds in English, things will really be much easier, such as fan and van. Because sometimes in Filipino, we usually hear it as, okay, give me the pan. Let's now write the ban. And honestly, that will really create problems or confusions, right? So try to pronounce it properly. It's not a problem if you say it a bit slower, but still surely. Slowly but surely. Fan, van, bet, bat, sight, side. Okay? Now, let's now go to your suprasegmental features class. Now, these class are those articulatory features which are superimposed over more than one segment. Sample would be your vowel or consonant, and these segments may have been including with your stress, intonation, juncture, and pitch. Now, we will go over around these features as to how they are properly used and how they are even properly read in words or IPA. Now, the first feature here, class, is your stress. Every word spoken in isolation has at least one stressed syllable. But of course, we have also established that once the word already has only one syllable, then automatically the stress is entirely in the entire word. Okay? Now, in articulatory terms, class, involves a rise in air pressure, an increase in the activity of the respiratory muscles, forces more air out of the lungs, which is why when you try to pronounce words on its stressed syllable, you can notice that there is the force that you are creating in order to properly pronounce it naturally, right? Such when I say the word naturally, the stress naturally. Okay? Now, in acoustic terms, class, if you look into the sound waves produced, the stressed syllable is perceived as longer, louder, and higher pitch. Again, I'll repeat that. Longer, louder, and higher pitch. And I think you have also noticed that. Now, there are three different kinds of stress, class. We have the primary stress, which is the extreme loud, and the sounds are given full value. Stress or the secondary stress, as for this one, looks like in a schwa also, for long words such as knowledgeable. Again, knowledgeable. And finally, your tertiary stress is lighter than the secondary. But of course, in English, to be much more easier, they usually refer more into the primary stress because it dictates the proper pronunciation of the syllables. Now, if we read now the following words, we can have, try to guess. How should it be pronounced? 5 seconds. Now, let's look now into the stress. Abominable. We don't say it as abominable. No, that's abominable. Patriarchy. Executive. We don't say that as executive. No, that's executive. Confidential, right? Just like that, I just made a usual mistake that we just use it on confidential, but actually that should be confidential. And interpretation, right? So that goes on the stress. One more time. Abominable, patriarchy, executive, confidential, interpretation. Okay? That's around it on stress. Now, you might have also noticed, why is it that the stress looks a bit different in IPA? Because, class, to mark stress in words, the stress mark follows the syllable that is stressed, such as this one. Your stress in this word is about. So, about. However, in IPA, the stress mark is put at the beginning of the syllable, which is why it's pronounced as about. Again, the stress, about. So that's how you pronounce it. Again, about. Now, most words, class, with 2 syllables are stressed on the first syllable. Lesson, always, wholly, better, right? Now, compound nouns have primary stress on the first component and a secondary stress on the second, such as peacock, sunflower, blackboard, milkfish, right? And you've noticed that we don't even go downwards automatically on the second stress. On the secondary stress, we even try to highlight or emphasize the syllable. Again, peacock, sunflower, sunflower, blackboard, milkfish. Okay? Compound verbs have a primary stress on the second component and a secondary stress on the first component. Now, if you look into this, again, this would now understand, outdo, interact. Okay? Now, it's on the second component. Again, secondary stress on the first component. Understand, outdo, interact. Okay? Now, finally, you have your intensive reflexive pronouns receive stronger stress on the second syllable. Yourself, myself, ourselves, right? And again, class, this wouldn't be possible to be described without the phonetic environments at hand. So it's the best, just like that, the best test for us to see on stress. Numbers ending in teen show a rhythmic shift in stress from the first syllable to the last to distinguish clearly between 30, 13, right? 30, 13, 40, 14. Also, many words show a functional shift in stress to indicate their use either as noun, first syllable, or as a verb. And this is also very important, class, because we usually see words with different spelling, or no, with the same spelling but with different meanings, depending on how it's used. Just like when we say, I want to give you a present, and I'll present you a gift. Very different, right? Present, present. Present, noun, present, verb. Record, record. Still, very different as to how you hear it, right? Record, record. Because you don't even say record. A bit weird, right? So, it's record, record. Record. Again, present, present. Record, record. No, record. Alright. Now, stress. Generally, when a suffix is added to a word, the new form retains the stress on the same syllable as the word from which it was derived. Much as happy, happiness, cloudy, cloudiness. See? Words ending in shon, shon, ik, kul, and ity with these suffixes always have primary stress on the syllable preceding the ending. Logical, examination, historic, right? Actually, that should be, that should be logical still. Okay. Now, let's now go to the intonation. Intonation, class, refers to the patterns of pitch variation in a sentence. It does not refer to the discrete pitches of different vowels, to pitch accent, nor to physiologically determine variations in pitch due to the size and shape of a person's vocal or vocal apparatus. The pitch patterns of intonation are similar to tunes distributed over sentences in an organized, systematic way. Now, you've noticed that when you say declarative sentences and interrogative sentences, the intonation would sometimes go up and sometimes go down, right? Now, let's take a look at this. Intonation is represented in a gross fashion by writing the punctuation marks. You know about this already. And intonation patterns may also indicate the attitude or relation of the speaker to the hearer, as well as various contextual features. Now, because of this, class, it's a phonological feature, meaning, or its meaning lies within the province of syntax and pragmatics. Basically, when we talk about intonation, you touch syntax because it depends on what kind of construction or grammatical sentence are you going to make or at the same time, is there any meaning behind what you're saying? Which is why it touches pragmatics. Now, we have the falling intonation, the rising falling intonation, and the non-final intonation. For the falling, it's for questions answerable by yes or no, and tag questions to ask. But the rising falling intonation for declarative sentences, questions not answerable by yes or no, and tag to confirm. And finally, non-final intonation would be for enumeration, or when you are enumerating items. Furthermore, we also have the long falling, which is now more into the focused intonation features, expresses finality, conclusion, affirmation, or agreement, or should I say a confirmation, right? Next would be the short falling, expresses an attenuated or qualified conclusion. Long rising expresses questioning and lack of finality. Short rising expresses some degree of reservation or functions as a signal of attentiveness or the continuation marker. The rising falling expresses finality with added emotion, emphasis, enthusiasm, certainty, annoyance, and your falling rising expresses querulousness, skepticism, and reservation. Now, here we have a sample. A whale is a mammal. The topic again of the conversation class is whales. Now, what the speaker is adding to the conversation is that these animals are mammals as opposed to fish. So mammal is new information. So you again focus idea on the mammal there. So which is why the statement has a long falling intonation. Mammal, right, is very long and is falling. A whale is a mammal. Here, mammal is a topic and whale is new information. So basically, it's about how you focus words in your sentence. A whale is a mammal. You focus that it's a mammal. A whale is a mammal. So your focus there now is that whale is a mammal. It's a new information. It's also in the command, also has falling intonation when compliance is suspected. Close the window. Take your seats, right? You focus into the word so that the person who is listening unto you will clearly understand what you're referring to, right? Let's say, for example, let's try that. Close the windows. And especially if you are a low-toned person, you wouldn't, or the listener wouldn't really be sure what to close. Except, of course, if it's really near, right? Or take your seats. You're not even sure what to take, right? So again, you focus on the object, right? Now, your intonation. A yes or no question has a long rising intonation pattern since it expects an answer. Do you want some coffee? Do you want cream in your coffee? Right? You focus on the item or the word. Do you want coffee or tea? Do you want coffee or tea? Okay? So, as you notice, so how I pronounce it from the third one, do you want coffee or tea? Very different as compared to, do you want coffee or tea? Now it's much more different. You're giving up on coffee or you're giving up coffee? And you want a new car, eh? Now, that is where you can notice your long rising intonation patterns. Now, an echo question which asks for the repetition of what has been said before. He said, what? You did what? Right? So you want somebody to repeat what really happened. A what question has a long falling intonation, like a statement here. Let's say, where did you put this paper? Neutral. But if you would say, where did you put the paper? You're now really asking onto the question or to the person. So this focuses on you as new information. Okay? Now, There is also the tag question class, which has two tone groups. The first half is syntactically a statement, while the second half is syntactically a question. For example, you will help, won't you? Again, you will help, won't you? So, again, if you look into this, this follows the expected pattern where the first tone unit has short, falling intonation because it is a statement, and the second tone unit has short, rising intonation because it is a yes or no question, right? So that again, if you notice, the first one there, it is help, short, falling intonation, won't you? Okay, he bought a paper, didn't he? Didn't he? Right. So this is not a real question, but merely asks for confirmation still. So unlike the first one class, the second tone unit has long, falling intonation. Okay? Now, an alternative question consists of two tone groups as well, first having question intonation and the second statement intonation. Did you buy a paper or not? Again, the first pattern is a long rising, paper, and the second, long falling, or not. Paper or not. Okay? The second tone unit acts as a statement added as a kind of afterthought. A list, now for enumeration class, is a number of tone groups with short rising intonation pattern indicating that the discourse continues. I bought some apples, oranges, and peaches. Because the last tone group now is falling because this is a statement. Long falling intonation in the first two tone groups yields a very slow, deliberate, solemn style. Apples, oranges, peaches, right? It's very different on how you pronounce it on regards to tone or intonation. Well, long rising intonation of these tone units yields a highly dramatized style, often used when addressing children. Do you want an apple, an orange, or a peach? Peach, right? The last tone group is rising because this is a yes or no question. So again, class, it's very much important for us to manipulate our tones because we wouldn't want ourselves to end up monotonous. And that's what we're trying to avoid in speaking in English. And even so in even other languages that we know, right? Question expressing great doubt or surprise has a falling rising intonation pattern. Are you sure? The vowel of the tonic syllable may be elongated. Are you sure? It's raining. It's raining. Right? It's raining. Now, a statement expressing great certainty has a rising falling intonation pattern. Let's take note of this. I don't know. Because I've told you several times. Let's say, for example, the situation was you have to wear your jacket. It's raining. Okay? So there is the focus on, or the force, when you're pronouncing the words there. Now, when a vocative or a parenthetical is added to a tone unit, the preceding intonation pattern generally continues over it. Did you catch what she said, Jerry? We're in for some hard times, I think. In this case, there may also be short rising intonation in the parenthetical to lighten up the utterance. So, now, let's now go to the juncture. It is the break or pause between words. Your cross-juncture class may be weak, single juncture for comma, double juncture for semicolon, and double cross-juncture for period. Basically, class, this is what we really put in sentences, especially when we want pauses in between the words we say. And one problem that I also observe when we're trying to practice English is we tend to speak things so fast. And the information we give might be a little problematic as to how it can be understood. So, again, try to cut information. Don't make things fast. If you think it will take much time, then still consider the situation. If nobody is really not in a hurry, then you can try to dissect information. In that way, it will be much clearer for them. And finally, class, pitch is the perceived frequency of a sound wave or the highness or lowness of voice, right? Sometimes we get to speak so high and sometimes we get to speak so low, okay? So it depends on how we actually speak, depending also on the situation, okay? And that's basically it on your phonological features or the suprasegmental features. Basically, class, when we talk about suprasegmental features, focus on how you speak right now. If you think that we're being monotonous, try to practice our pronunciation and play with words. That is what I believe as the best practice to be used right now in order for us to practice further our English speaking skills. Thank you and have a great day.